I want to tell you a story about a little man, if I can, a gnome named Grimble Grumble.
Hello to the YouTube. So, recently some friends of mine, Kristi Winters, Kevin Logan, Garrett, and Michael Rowlands, made a hangout in which they talked about logical fallacies used by Sargon of Akkad. So I was involved in like some of the planning of this, not a whole lot, but the whole purpose of it was just to reveal how he uses contradictory methods to make his arguments. And Mr. Akkad saw this and decided, that's a bunch of bullshit, I'm going to tear this down. So he made a response. So I'd like to respond to Mr. Sargon's response to these dudes making the video. So let's have a look.
I don't know whether they are this stupid on purpose. I really don't. And I think it's...
So straight away we see he's making a very fine and interesting argument that Kristi Winters, Kevin Logan, Garrett, and Michael Rowlands are stupid, and it's hard to believe they're that stupid. That's a great argument there. It gives a lot of food for thought. Like, are they stupid? Why are they stupid? I bet they're really stupid people. So I think, like, you've got it nailed so far. Let's have a look at the rest.
Okay, as you can see by just the very title of this live stream, it's called Sargon of Akkad and Creationists Rely on Logical Fallacies, as if this isn't obviously the fallacy of association, which most people know as guilt by association. This is unbelievable, Kristi.
So you know what, on this first point I actually agree with Sargon of Akkad. I think that Kristi Winters' title is a little bit kind of well poisoning, and it is an association fallacy, because just because Sargon argues like creationists doesn't mean that he is a creationist. The funny thing is, in Sargon's reply, he doesn't refute the fact that he argues like creationists. He just takes a problem with the fallacy. But I guess that's fair, because this is a video about fallacies Sargon uses, so to use a fallacy in the title is not very fair at all. However, if you actually look at the way that Sargon argues throughout his channel, you'll see that he uses association fallacies all the time. And this is going to become a theme of this reply, that he doesn't believe that the source from which you get information is very important. And I think, in this case, the source is Sargon of Akkad, saying that association fallacies are bad and you shouldn't use them. But he included on his channel this video, which is Feminists Love Islamists. The entire thing is an association fallacy, not only between feminists and Islamists, of which there isn't no association, so it's like a complete non sequitur, but Chauncey Binks, who is a particular feminist, and all other feminists. And it's in the title, Feminists Love Islamists. Chauncey Binks is all feminists. She represents all feminists, and she loves Islamists, even though that's not even proven. But Sargon will put this up non-reflexively and say that this is a video which actually is making a good point. So he has committed an association fallacy on his own channel. Would he apologize for that? No. I don't believe his ego could really handle that. And, I mean, he could, but then I'd probably be able to find a whole lot of other association fallacies on his channel. And he's not the kind of guy to apologize, so he's not about to, like, just start apologizing willy-nilly about this kind of shit. But I think he's an incredibly bad source for association fallacies, but I'll give him the point there. Okay, Kristi's title was a bit of an association fallacy. Associating the thought style of creationists with Sargon is not entirely fair. But Sargon complaining about association fallacies is crocodile tears. So you're both in the wrong.
But what you are doing is trying to make it sound like I am a creationist. And you literally say this, but let's have a quick watch.
I've already addressed this part, but I gotta add, I don't think Kristi ever said that you are a creationist. I think you just made that up. She never said that. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I'd have to troll through the whole 2-hour thing and see where she said Sargon is a creationist, but I never saw it.
And you have a series called What Has Sargon Got Wrong Now?
I do, yes. I've sort of discontinued that on the basis that I'm just going to occasionally give him a little bit of an intellectual slap.
Kev, are you sure that's why you've discontinued it? Are you sure it's not because you look like a fucking moron? Are you sure it's not because, I don't know, in one of the videos, you tried to take a medieval painting of Trojans fighting Amazons and represent it as women fighting on a medieval battlefield?
I've edited that bit to be slightly shorter. There was just some kind of like put down of like Kevin's history degree or whatever. But yeah, I actually agree with Sargon on that bit, because I saw that hangout concerning women in the military, and I did not find Kevin's argument convincing. So I agree that that was a bad argument. However, how does he know that Kevin discontinued that series because he was a quote-unquote fucking idiot because you owned him or whatever on that particular topic? You've got no evidence that that's why he discontinued it, so I'll just assume that was just a random insult.
Starting from here.
Oh my god, she's prepared slides.
I literally do not know why that is funny. He's like, ah! She's prepared slides! Oh. Why is that funny? I don't understand. Like, if you follow Kristi Winters at all, she's like a social scientist, and she's into slides, I guess. Like, that's kind of her thing. She does research. She uses university standards, and some people disagree with social sciences, women's studies, gender studies, for example, even being subjects. They think that it's all total bullshit. But even if it was bullshit, I'm not getting into that fucking hornet's nest right now. They still require a certain level of argumentation and research. So when she makes things, she likes to provide sources, and that involves making slides. But to Sargon, this is funny. I guess he's so used to not doing any research that he just finds it really hilarious when someone prepares. Then he shouldn't laugh at this video then. I haven't prepared anything, so this is perfect for him.
And learning about the breadth of anti-feminist discourse, I found it really intellectually poor. It's kind of like the McDonald's of food. You know, when academics are out there working really hard to make 3-course meals, people are getting up on YouTube and just feeding you oil-filled crap that's not really...
Have you considered possibly that the level of discourse is being set by the people who we are responding to? Unless you're in agreement with Lacey Green when she says everything's problematic, and Anita Sarkeesian when she says everything's sexist.
I do not know Lacey Green's argument in terms of everything being problematic, because I do not watch Lacey Green. Honestly, I don't really enjoy her videos, so I don't watch them. But I would assume if it was a rational argument about everything being problematic, she would be making a very obvious point that everything in the world is a problem to somebody, and that's perfectly true. Even just like a fucking keyboard is a problem to someone who can't move their fingers properly, or stairs a problem to someone who can't walk up them, or certain language is a problem to some other person. And if you're putting it that way, then you're just stating something which is a fact, but you're not attributing a value to that. You're just saying everything is problematic in some way. Now, if you want to decide that that means this like hand-wringing feminist madness where just like you can't even go out the door because everything's sexist and it's attacking you or whatever, you're free to do that, but that's your logical leap. You are adding that on top of this idea that everything's problematic. Now, remember I said I haven't seen Lacey Green's video. I can only assume it was that sort of thing, which is actually like a totally logical thing to say. Everything's problematic. Yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean something. You have to like read into that to see what that means. Like, this fucking microphone is problematic to somebody. I don't know who the fuck that person is who this microphone is problematic to. Maybe like 1 out of 6 billion people. But everything's problematic also from the point of view that the entire world is going to implode and we're all going to die. So I mean, that's a bit problematic too. And the fact that I'm going to die one day is kind of problematic for me too. So I mean, everything's a bit problematic. And this mouse is problematic because one day it's going to break down. Because one day it's going to break down, I'm going to have to get a new mouse. And it's a problem. They should make mouses that just never break. As for Anita Sarkeesian, I think that you completely took her comment out of context. She was saying, I study this subject. This subject involves looking at misogyny and sexism. And due to looking at the subject all the time, you come to believe that everything is sexist. She wasn't saying that everything is sexist. She was saying that's the kind of point of view that studying certain subjects gives you, but you have to step back and you have to be more objective about it. And you have to understand, okay, maybe everything is not sexist. It's just like, I'm looking at a particular subject. Like if you're studying war history, eventually, maybe when you go to sleep, you're dreaming of wars and you're dreaming of people shooting each other and blood and guts, but you wake up and you walk around in your everyday life. That's not what life is. That's what you're studying. That's what's in your fucking head because you're studying it. That's what she was saying. You took her out of context. That's the problem. If you're not honest about these subjects, they can't be properly debated. So, I mean, you're just spouting bullshit, because you're not even like giving fidelity to their arguments. That's the point. Give your opponent's arguments fidelity.
And what you see on Thunderfoot's channel and with Sargon's channel and the Armored Skeptic response to Steve Shives is garbage.
Great argument, Kristi. You're really getting the hang of this. Oh, don't mind me. Just continue rebutting by calling things garbage. It's very convincing.
So a disclaimer, I cut a little bit out there when she was talking about the principle of charity and saying that you should give the best interpretation of your enemy's arguments, and Sargon came back with a snarky thing like, oh, but you'll be doing that for me, won't you, blah blah blah, whatever. I don't know if they're giving Sargon's arguments the most charity, but you gotta admit, everybody struggles to do that, and I would hope that you would do it for me, but you probably wouldn't, because nobody really does that for each other. So I think at least Kristi's trying, and she's saying that she's trying. Now in the next part of him saying, oh, you just like saying everything's garbage, and that's all you're really doing. Well, this is a 2-hour hangout. There was a lot of information in this hangout. I watched this hangout. They went over all kinds of examples. They talked about all kinds of things. So you could just take her saying that Thunderfoot, Sargon of Akkad, and Armored Skeptic having garbage arguments is kind of like her thesis that she's putting forth, and then the rest of the hangout is to test it. And you've really got to give the rest of the video a chance, Sargon. You always jump the gun. You're like, oh, well, I got you there. I'm just going to like ignore the other 2 hours, which you did talk a little bit about the other 2 hours. But having watched the whole hangout, you cut out so much of the hangout as to make it almost meaningless. I guess you kind of came to the hangout, watched it, and sort of shotgunned a few bits and just like plucked them out, you know. But if you really want to make a proper response to this hangout, you're gonna have to sit down, you're gonna have to fucking watch it all, you know? Perhaps you did watch it all, but I don't know what the fuck you were doing. Maybe you were jerking off. I'm sorry. That's a little bit insulting. I take that back.
Just garbage. And as a consequence, nobody actually learns anything interesting or new, or even hears a decent rebuttal. Because what are put up are usually straw men and straw women that are then knocked down with crap arguments.
You can't even be charitable enough to say, well, at least, I mean, they're knocking down their straw men well. No, we're not even knocking down the straw men well. But I find that very interesting because you say straw men, but how exactly can one straw man someone's argument when you take the video of them talking, play it, allow them to make their argument, and then you reply to it? I mean, how can that be a straw man? How could I do that? I don't understand how I can take them talking and that be the misrepresentation of their position. Unless their position is fucking retarded, and you know it, and you don't want to accept that maybe that is actually what they think.
That whole segment there is typical of Sargon, and that's why he's such a terrible guy, and just like probably the worst person on the anti-feminist side. He goes into this whole long explanation, blah, 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 talking a whole bunch of shit, which he always does. And then at the end he throws in retarded. Because that is the thing with this guy. He's always trying to find an excuse to throw in the word retarded. Because he hates people who are not fully bodied. He's an ableist. That's what ableists do. They say, oh, so Kristi said this, Kristi said that, Kristi said this. And then at the end, because she's retarded. Because that's what he wants to do. He wants to pick on people who are not able-bodied. And I think that's just the kind of person he is. He's mean-spirited. He's a cold-hearted person. And I think if he had special needs kids, he'd probably have them put down based on that fucking thing he just said. Yeah, I'm strawmanning you right now. I just cut off your video. At the end there, you said retarded, so then I strawmanned you. That's how you do it. You just cut it up, and then you just sniper at it. And that's how you strawman a video that you cut up. It's pretty fucking easy.
Whether it's taking a quote out of context.
I hope you're paying attention to this, Kev.
Or using a really biased source.
Using a biased source is not a logical fallacy. It may well be that the information you get from this biased source is incorrect or incomplete, but that does not mean a biased source is incapable of giving you accurate information. And do you really think you're in a position to talk about bias?
Yes, Sargon is correct in the semantics of this argument. Using a biased source is not a fallacy. However, it does lead to something, or can be driven by something, which is also not a fallacy, but which is also something which is a bad thing to do in an argument, or a bad thing to be driven by, which is a confirmation bias. If you have a confirmation bias against a certain subject, and then you choose a source which is biased, and that's where you get your information from, that can confirm your bias. That's why you choose a biased source. If you didn't have any particular bias to confirm, or if you were trying to give absolute fidelity to the argument that you were critiquing, you would go with the most neutral source you can find. And that's going to come up again, because when it comes to sources, Sargon is kind of out there. He doesn't do a particularly good job with sources. As for Kevin, I mean, Kevin's his own man. He can defend himself. I'm not going to white knight. But I love the Manosphere. It's a great series.
I don't give a fuck. I'm doing it. Piss off out of it, will you?
Okay, but only if you give me some chicken.
It's weird how much carbon dating and the theory of evolution come up when refuting feminism, isn't it? Or maybe you're full of shit. Only one of the things you've said there is actually a logical fallacy. You don't seem to know the difference between a logical fallacy and a falsehood.
No, that wasn't a fallacy when Kristi said that carbon dating, etc. comes up in discussions with anti-feminists, and I'm pretty sure that was just a mistake. She just misphrased that, because I know that she doesn't think that, and you probably know she doesn't think that either. But that was a slip of the tongue. But it wasn't a fallacy either, it was a non sequitur. Although as a quick addendum, I've just checked, and it is classed under logical fallacies, or at least arguments that contain non sequiturs are included in logical fallacies. So I thought I'd point that out. I guess I'm just providing you with a little more clarity that you didn't bother going into, Sargon. So you're welcome.
Anyone want to respond?
Yeah, you mentioned using biased sources. I think the prime example of that, and it's again to bring it back to the core idea of him being a bit like a creationist, was when he used the American Enterprise Institute, an incredibly right-wing think tank, as his source for the definition of progressive, was it, I believe?
Okay, to start with, it was the Heritage Foundation, and I chose them specifically because they weren't liberal. Specifically because I knew they would not have a progressive bias. I mean, they might have a bias against it, but at least I couldn't be accused of confirmation bias by using them.
Now that categorically does not make any fucking sense at all. Why would you choose something that has an explicit bias against the definition they're providing? That would be, well, by definition, one of the worst sources to use. That would be like going to Hitler, and I'm sorry, Poe's law, I know, but like going to Hitler and asking him to define the Jews for you. Oh, you can't accuse me of a bias, you know, I mean, Hitler, he doesn't have a bias in favor of the Jews. I mean, he might have a favor against them. And look, that might sound ridiculous because I'm bringing up the Nazis, I know there's always a problem, but you can literally apply that to anything. Like, anything that you can think of. I'm drinking some fucking tea here. If I went to a guy who fucking hated tea, and I said, could you define tea for me? And he said, it's a disgusting liquid that tastes like garbage and makes me want to vomit. I would not take that as my definition of what tea is supposed to be. Now, he might say something good. He might say, tea is made from, tea leaves and the substance of tea, which they harvest in Bangladesh or whatever, and it's just like a delicious drink. I don't fucking know. But that would not be the best source to go to for that definition. So that is ridiculously absurd and extremely intellectually lazy, and I feel embarrassed for the fact that this guy thinks that that's a good thing to do when you're looking for a definition. And it proves that you've got a bias against feminism, and it proves that you've got a bias against progressivism or anything that is liberal, because you're going to a fucking right-wing think tank. In order to prove that you don't have a bias, why would you need to prove that you don't have a bias only to go in the other direction and prove you do have a bias? Why don't you just choose a neutral source? Find a source which is neutral, that doesn't have any fucking chips in the game, and there you go. You found a good thing to get the definition of liberalism from. Don't go to a right-wing think tank whose entire purpose in life is to get regulations cut, to get taxes cut, to get right-wing politicians voted in, to spread trash about liberalism, and to shit all over multiculturalism and fucking PC culture and everything to do with the left that apparently you are a part of. That's ridiculous. But I feel bad, because maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe there's a source of information out there that could provide me with a better view of the kind of person you are, Sargon. And I don't want to be accused of being biased in your favor. So I'm going to look at this website, and it's going to tell me what you're like as a human being. And it's a great source for me to go to, because it doesn't mean I'm biased in your favor, which is where we should all get our definitions from. Sargon of Akkad is a YouTube pundit who attacks regressive leftists, SJWs, and feminists, especially Anita Sarkeesian. He argues by video editing to quote mine, insert his commentary between theirs. Wow, you quote mine. Apparently, according to this, and this is a great source, that these groups are too PC and they abuse identity politics, that they see racism and sexism where there is none. They fail to criticize Islam for the crimes of Islamists, and that feminism is on the whole a hate mob. Accordingly, he has defended Gamergate and reactionaries. You've defended reactionaries? You sound like a scumbag. He has gained a rather large following, but his support cleaves among political lines. Supporters thinks he trashes the bad parts of liberalism, well, you sound great then, and detractors think he promotes illiberal and ultimately misogynistic ideas. You're a misogynist. It's right here from my source, which is not biased towards you, so it was a good source. Although he criticizes religion, this is much smaller than his anti-liberal content. You sound anti-liberal, you're not liberal. He doesn't much like Rational Wiki. What a cunt. You don't like the source, which is kind of against you? Wow, that sounds kind of hypocritical, considering you're like choosing a source which is against something you don't like. Wow, that appears to be what I'm doing right now. But what would you expect? You are a misogynist. It's right here on the wiki.
You think, well, that can't possibly be serious. You can't possibly think that that's an acceptable source for a definition of a left-wing cause. Or of anything, frankly. I mean, they're so obviously biased that they employ Christina Huff Summers, for fuck's sake. You know.
Do you even know that you are committing an ad hominem fallacy right now? I mean, are you even aware of this? You didn't even get the right organization. You didn't even attempt to address whatever their argument was, whatever the statement that I took from them was.
I could go to the Heritage Foundation and look at the definition they provided of liberalism, progressivism, feminism, whatever. But that's not the point that is being made here. We're talking about sources. And if you follow politics at all, if you pay any attention particularly to the American system, which I've seen a lot, like C-SPAN and shit, PBS, fucking NPR, all of the various news sources available, you will know that right-wing think tanks exist for the purpose of destroying liberalism in order to bolster the Republican Party so that they can cut taxes and cut regulations and cut the EPA, cut environmental protection, deal with all of these things. That is not a conspiracy. That is literally what all of those foundations want to do, and by all, I am being totally fair. All of these right-wing think tanks, like the Cato Institute, the Heritage Foundation, the American Enterprise Institute, which are run by the Koch brothers, that's the point of these foundations. So, Sargon said Kevin did a ad hominem fallacy by equating the Heritage Foundation to the American Enterprise Institute. Go look at what they want to do. And it's incredibly similar, it just represents slightly different interest groups. So that is bullshit, I don't buy it at all. Those are fucked up organizations which are trying to destroy democracy. And they're trying to destroy the Democratic Party. They're trying to destroy the democratic process because they try to suppress the vote, they get up to all kinds of shady shit, and they want to pollute as much as they want, and they want all of the politicians in their pockets. And I guess, I don't know if Sargon supports them, but he seems to want to believe the total bullshit they say, this fucking corporate scumbaggery, which is just, they don't care about the common man, they don't care about the people. So why you would take them as a source is beyond me. That just points to the idea that you're not very liberal, to be perfectly honest. I don't know how a liberal person could possibly be like, you know, I saw a really good article the other day about progressive politicians on Breitbart. You know, Breitbart exists to attack and destroy liberals. So how could you possibly take anything they have to say at face value? You have to investigate it yourself. Now, it could be true. It could possibly be true, but you can't take it at face value. That's the fucking point, and you did. And you took it at face value because you didn't want to seem biased towards progressivism, which is nonsense, because it made you biased against it. I don't understand you, man.
You've just assumed it's wrong based on the fact that they are right-wing.
Okay, it's wrong to assume that the Heritage Foundation's definition of left-wing ideals and ideas are wrong automatically. You should check it out yourself. But what we're saying is, you really need to investigate that. You can't take that as just being the definition, because, and this is going to be a slightly out of left field comparison, this is sort of like rape cases. People don't want to take the woman at her word that she was raped, but I think, And in this book that I'm reading, it makes the same point, that you should believe this person, but in the course of investigation, it will be shown whether it's true. And if you find out that it's not true, then obviously stop believing the victim. But that it is safer for law enforcement, for the sake of investigating and not having a bias, to believe the victim that they were raped, but keep their eyes and ears open for any information that is dodgy or might contradict the fact that they were raped. And people can't separate that from the fact that that means that if you believe that the victim is innocent, that means that the guy is guilty. But I think you just separate those two out. You partition them. You just say he's an alleged rapist. We don't know for sure whether he raped her, but we are believing her for now, and we're just going to separate his guilt from her innocence for now, and then they'll come together later in the trial, and then, or in the investigation, we'll figure out whether what she's saying is true. So the thing that you lack here is an inquisitive mind or investigative mind. You just want to say, okay, these guys have a ridiculous bias against liberal ideas because they're the fucking Heritage Foundation, for fuck's sake. But I have incredible confirmation bias, and I'm just going to say, well, that's a good thing to work off. It's good to start working from poisoned land. You know, I want my plants to grow up in a pond of poopy sludge which is infested with maggots. That's a great way to start my crop of investigation. Well, no, I mean, I think Kristi expects more than that, and all of us expect more than that. And you can be as smarmy as you want about it, but you've miserably failed to actually stand up to any kind of scrupulous investigation of this subject, which is apparently such a big deal to you. You know, if it's such a big deal to you, you should learn more about it, and you should do a better job of investigating it.
I feel like maybe I'm bullying you people. Maybe you're actually maybe you're actually this retarded. I can't believe...
Nobody feels bullied by you, Sargon. I mean, I've hung out with some of these folks, and we generally just trade stories about how fucking ridiculous so many of the arguments of people who follow you make, and how fucking ridiculous many of your arguments are. If finding somebody else's arguments ridiculous is being bullied, then yes, you have bullied us. And we're seeking vengeance. No, we're not. We just want world peace, man.
It's like asking a theist for a definition of atheist.
Exactly.
They're not going to get it right.
You think a creationist can't tell you that an atheist is someone who doesn't believe in any kind of deities?
I listened back to that a couple of times. I think Michael said the pro-definition of atheism, so I may have misheard him there, but I think he was saying a definition of atheism that's favorable. And I think that's a fair point. Obviously, a theist could provide a pro-definition of atheism, but they're not that likely to. They're more likely to say an atheist is someone who lacks meaning. They think that when you die, everything turns to nothing, and therefore their life is very empty. And they should really get the Lord, because the Lord is fucking great. They probably think something like that. You're obviously going to find some theists here and there that provide like the dictionary perfect definition of atheism. But the point we're fucking making is that's not who you would go to. You would go to a neutral, or as neutral as possible. I understand some people take issue with the word neutral, but the most neutral you can find definition would be far preferable to asking somebody who has a problem with atheism what the definition is. It doesn't mean you couldn't find the right one, it just means it's a stupid idea.
Okay, I think I figured out what the problem here is. I think these people have spent so long, unconsciously I'm going to say, not deliberately, unconsciously misrepresenting everything their ideological opposition have ever done or said or any of their positions, that they think everyone else does the same thing.
So this is a little bit trippy right here. It kind of like puts your head in a bit of a spin, because we're going through a wormhole into another wormhole into a vortex of just confusion at this point. Because this is Sargon of Akkad, who's built his entire fucking life on tearing down feminism and saying the gender pay gap doesn't exist due to A, B, and C. That this feminist has stupid hair and yells at people, so that's obviously what feminism is all about. And some feminists at the university try to shut some shit down that means other feminist ideas are stupid and it's all made up, and this misogyny is just sort of only really exists in the Middle of the East, and the patriarchy is like a religion and everything's a blue. It's just all bullshit. He's saying that Kristi, Kevin, Garrett, Michael, so forth, unconsciously misrepresent their opponent's positions. This guy is saying that. This guy, who spent his entire life misrepresenting feminists. And has he misrepresented all feminists? No, but that's the entire fucking point. There are some feminists out there who conceivably could treat feminism as a religion. And maybe they're the loudest ones, and maybe they're the easiest ones to criticize. But that's not me, and that's not these guys. And it's very unfair, and it's ridiculous of him to behave, and he does behave like this, that we are the same as the most radical feminists. And many of the feminists we don't like TERFs and SWERFs, and white feminists that we don't agree with. We're not the same as them. We don't agree with them. We don't like them. That's not feminism eating itself. That's us having particular values that are important to us. And he spends the whole time saying feminism is a monolith. That's just his thing. This is his whole fucking deal. If you spent like 2 seconds watching his stuff, and like some people love it. They love the fact that he represents feminism as a monolith, and other people such as us don't like it, but apparently we're wrong because we're stupid and we like feminism when we're a bunch of cucks. And that's the problem here. So coming from the king of misrepresentations, it's like a projection inside a projection in a vortex of doom which just destroys everything, and it's the fucking antimatter. I think reality is breaking up because we're through the fucking looking glass right now. Are you fucking serious, man? That's like fucking Hitler. God, not again. Always the Hitler analogies. I can't help it, man. I got post-war on the mind. It's like fucking Hitler saying, wow, these guys over here, they just all think the Jews are bad or something. And then it's like, but that Hitler, you think the Jews are really bad. Hey, that's not fair. You know, I'm a great source. I'm Hitler / Sargon. Yes, Sargon is Hitler. That's what I'm trying to say. Literally.
An example of feminist writing, and he cited the Scum Manifesto, which, Michael, do you want to tell a little bit about what that document actually is?
Yeah, it's kind of the rantings and ravings of a psychopathic, mentally ill
Feminist?
woman. The fact that she's a feminist is kind of irrelevant.
The fact that Valerie Solanas was a feminist was irrelevant to her writing the Scum Manifesto. I mean, I'm happy to agree that it's irrelevant to her shooting Andy Warhol.
I cannot speak for Michael, but the way that I heard that was he was saying the fact that she was a feminist is irrelevant to the fact that A, she's fucking insane, and B, she shot Andy Warhol. So can you definitively say that nobody who is an anti-feminist is nuts? And nobody who's an anti-feminist has ever written anything that's influential who was also kinda psycho? How about fucking Rush V, Stefan Molyneux? How about Warcorp 666? That guy is anti-feminist. Just watch Kevin Logan's Manosphere series. Are you saying that you're basically the same as all of those dudes? Why don't you apologize for all of the anti-feminists out there who say pretty misogynistic shit? Have you seen that video of all of those Voice for Men dudes saying, like, suck my dick, Jessica Valenti, and basically threatening her with rape? Have you seen that video? Well, why don't you apologize for them? They're anti-feminist. That's the fucking point. Being anti-feminist doesn't make you insane. Being anti-feminist doesn't make you write a text which is filled with the ramblings of a lunatic mind, and neither does feminism. Now, we can have a discussion about how prevalent loony people are in certain movements, and that's a very valid conversation to have. But it is not valid to say that this woman who wrote the Scum Manifesto wrote it in such a intense and crazy way because she was a feminist, because then necessarily all other feminists would write lunatic texts. And I'm sure you've got lots of other examples of lunatic texts by feminists, but it's the same with them, because you can apply that across the board to every movement ever made in the history of the universe by Jesus himself when he sat on the magical toilet of the galaxy and shat out the Milky Way. Galaxy of the Milky Way, that doesn't make sense, but fuck you.
But do you honestly think the fact that she's a feminist has nothing to do with the Scum Manifesto? It's that she's crazy that the Scum Manifesto turned out as it did.
Did you seriously just ask whether somebody wrote something that was crazy because they were crazy or not? Of course it was because they were crazy. That's why they wrote something crazy. If you do something crazy and you're driven to do it by you, It's because you're crazy. That's why you do something crazy. That's why there's normal people walking around doing normal things, quote unquote, and then there's crazy people going out with guns and shooting other people and murdering and killing and doing violent rampages. And that's why there's people who play video games and they have a perfectly fun time playing a video game. And other people who play video games and they're playing the game and then the character starts talking to them and they're like, you should kill everyone. And they're like, what? What's that? What's that, Jill from Resident Evil? I should kill everyone. Okay, I'll go do that. Because they're crazy, you see? Whereas other people who play the games, they're not crazy. That's why they don't go out and kill their family. So, did you just ask, did somebody write a crazy text because they're crazy? Well, unless doing performance art, or it was just a work of fiction, in which case, we shouldn't even be talking about it as a serious feminist text, because people don't understand that it was just an elaborate joke, so it can't represent feminism. If it wasn't that, then yes. What a dumb question.
He was using it as an example of how feminists hate men, basically. And
Valerie Solanas is a feminist, as you said. I mean, the very beginning of the Wikipedia article. Scum Manifesto is a radical feminist manifesto by Valerie Solanas, published in 1967. It argues that men have ruined the world, and that it's up to women to fix it. To achieve this goal, it suggests the formation of Scum, an organisation dedicated to overthrowing society and eliminating the male sex. I can see why you're stumbling over justifying any...
Alright, well I've got a little bit of homework for you then, Sargon. How many feminists are advocating for the creation of Scum? I reckon... I don't know who the fuck you'd be able to find who is advocating for that. I guess I could hop on the Google machine and have a look. Okay, so Googling... Solanas organised a public forum on Scum at which 40 people, mostly men she characterised as creeps and masochists, showed up. Scum had no members besides her. So yeah, what relevance does an organisation which has zero evidence whatsoever have to do with feminism? According to Greer, little evidence existed that Scum ever functioned other than as Solanas. So you're saying one person is feminism. That's literally what you're saying. I mean, you can try to walk that back, you can provide some clarity, because you have not provided clarity on that. You're saying this one insane woman represents feminism. It would be as offensive as if I said all anti-feminists were represented by you, fat neckbeard. No, I'm just joking.
it just doesn't illustrate that at all, because the fact that she's a feminist is just completely irrelevant to the situation.
The fact that she's a feminist is irrelevant to the situation of her writing a radical feminist manifesto.
Again, yes, because she was a lunatic and a crazy person. That's why. She shot somebody because she was psychotic. And you can make an argument, okay, but feminists are psychotic and they are crazy and they are ridiculous. Therefore, it's fair to associate them with this ridiculous woman who went and shot somebody. But I mean, that would be like saying Beatles fans are all like Mark David Chapman, and they're all just waiting for an excuse to kill somebody because of Catcher in the Rye. And clearly, you know, Catcher in the Rye is integral to being a Beatles fan, because he was the best Beatles fan. Mark David Chapman, he was a really good Beatles fan. And it's really unfair to say that he doesn't represent true Beatles fans. That would be a no Scotsman fallacy. And also, Elliot Rodger, who hated women, I mean, he clearly wouldn't have liked feminists, so we could probably associate him with anti-feminists, and he's probably the logical conclusion of anti-feminists. They're probably going to just go on killing sprees and write manifestos about how women are complete whores and they should all die. And that's really fair to do. That's just the intellectually honest thing to do. No, obviously, the fact that she was a lunatic overrode her feminism, and the word radical is in there. Radical feminism. By its very nature, radical feminism is going to be controversial and going to be rejected by the majority of feminists. Whether or not you like the majority of feminists, whether or not you like what you see out there when it comes to feminism, radical feminism is marginalized. And that's a fact. They're just kind of louder. They're louder with Crowder, except not with Crowder, just louder. I gotta cut this bit out. This bit sucks. This bit is shit. but you got what I meant.
So, the manifesto is notorious and influential, and was one of the earliest and most radical tracts produced by the various strands of the American women's liberation movement. By 1969, it had become a kind of Bible for Cell 16 in Boston. According to a 2012 article by Arthur Goldwag on the Southern Poverty Law Center Hate Watch blog, Solanas continues to be much read and quoted in some feminist circles. Whether the manifesto should be considered a feminist classic is challenged by Heller because the manifesto rejected a hierarchy of greatness, but she said it remains an influential feminist text.
Yeah, but to say something is influential is not to say that it is fully agreed with or endorsed by the people that it has influenced. In the thing you read, it said Cell 16 was highly influenced by that writing, Scum, by that woman. Here's Cell 16, a militant feminist organization in the United States known for its program of celibacy, separation from men, and self-defense training, specifically karate. Considered too extreme by many mainstream feminists, the organization acted as a sort of hard left vanguard. So there's a few words in there that are key. Too extreme. They're too extreme for mainstream feminists. So there is a distinction between extreme and mainstream that you might reject, because I know you're extremely biased about feminism. You think all of them are extreme. They're just all the same. It's just a big glob. But no, these are the hard left extreme feminists. They are not part of the mainstream. And they were highly influenced by Scum, as you just read in that Wikipedia page. Now, other words in the Wikipedia page were earliest radical feminist group. So by that we can logically say that they probably influenced most radical feminists. And you know what? I mean, in certain circles, something like Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible is influential to people who are not Satanists and who are not necessarily as extreme. For example, it was probably a big influence on heavy metal musicians. Does that mean that all heavy metal musicians are like dyed-in-the-wool Satanists because they were influenced by this text? No. And people are influenced by things that are more extreme than what they actually believe in all the time. Like, for example, I'm highly inspired by Malcolm X's speeches. However, I believe Malcolm X's approach didn't work. It was faulty. MLK was the right way to go in terms of bringing people together and actually making progress. But I love Malcolm X's speeches, and I appreciate a radical doing something really intense and really challenging people. And I don't have his beliefs, but he was influential on me because he gives you a spark of like radicalism that influences what you do but doesn't overtake what you do. So I wouldn't consider myself a radical, but there's other people who embrace that to the fullest and they become total radicals on subjects to do with race, politics, etc. And that's those people. That's their choice. That's what they did with those texts. Other people are influenced in a sense which is not as direct, just like inspired in some way. Just like I'm inspired by the writings of Marx, but I'm not a Marxist, and I don't fully really believe in much of his ideas. I reject a fair number of them, and then other ones I think are like fairly decent, but his style of writing influences me, certainly. He's a great academic, a great intellectual. Part of being open to ideas is reading things that you wouldn't agree with normally because you want to expand your mind. And if you have a strong center, you won't let it take you over and turn you into a radical person, like catching the feminist cooties or some shit. Catching the extremist feminist disease and just turning into a psychopathic man killer. I guess I'd have to kill myself. That would suck. So, I don't hate men. I don't hate white people. I'm not a Marxist. I'm not any of these things. But I'm influenced by them. So for you to say that because this radical text is influential to feminists means that feminists are radical, to me just means you're not paying attention to reality and the ways in which things influence people every day. All kinds of things influence all kinds of people in lots of different ways, and not just in the most radical way. Because otherwise we would all be like raving loonies. And, okay, we kind of are, but you know what I mean.
Let's assume that her being a feminist is incidental, so it's not a radical feminist manifesto about wiping out all men. It's just a radical manifesto to wipe out all men. Just ideologically neutral. But empirical, probably. Why would feminists decide to be influenced by the ravings of a lunatic? Just out of interest, I don't know why you would think that isn't something that when people see it, and they do see it, they wouldn't think, wow, feminism's fucking awful, and so are its apologists.
Okay, I'm not running away or nothing. It's just this video was longer than I expected it to be, so I'm just going to address this last point here, and then I'm just going to, like, turn tail and run, because I'm a coward, man. I'm fucking scared. I'm scared. I don't know if I can reply to the properly. Okay, so why are feminists influenced by the Scum Manifesto? I will answer that question with a bunch of questions. Why are heavy metal bands influenced by Satan? Why was George Bush influenced by Karl Rove? Why are Republicans influenced by a sign of strength instead of substance in the figure of Donald Trump? Why was Elliot Rodger inspired by misogyny? Why does Sargon of Akkad take right-wing sources at face value? Why is he influenced by the Heritage Foundation? Why were black people influenced by Martin Luther King but chose to shave off the most controversial things that he said and homogenize him to make him into a friendly figure that everybody could get behind, even though he was actually kind of more radical than that? So why were blacks influenced by someone who, if you actually pay attention to some of the stuff he says, was kind of radical? Why is that? These are the questions of life. These are all the things we're all curious about. Why do things influence other things? And these are the kind of important questions that Sargon is trying to get his head around. One day he's going to figure out, why does this thing influence this thing? Why does this thing influence this thing? And how is it that this thing influences this thing without being the same thing? I don't know. That's impossible. If this influences this, then it has to equal this. Why? I don't know. I'm Sargon of Akkad. It just doesn't make sense to me. One day, you'll figure it out.